already started the recording, so.
Yeah, I know, I saw.
All right. Well, welcome back to Queens of the Paddock, an F1 podcast. My name is Alex.
And I'm Courtney.
And we are back today with a fun little history episode for everyone.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah.
It's a little different.
I know, yeah. I love like doing all these like the history ones because I just find it like so interesting because there's so much crazy stuff that goes on.
Yeah.
Like throughout all the years, and like there's just like, I mean, we're obsessed.
Yeah.
So.
And it's different. It's like things that I guess like being a new F1 fan, like it's really cool to just learn all these different pieces of like where F1 was and like how it's become where it is now, you know?
Right. No, for sure. And I think like when you get into it, and especially like for us, like we got into it with Drive to Survive, and like you're only seeing like this little piece of like what's happening currently, but there's so much from the past that it's just super interesting.
Oh yeah, 1000%. So
yeah. So we each have a little history story that we're going to tell everyone today.
Wait, each have a history story? What are you talking about?
No,
I thought we were just talking
yeah.
about the strike.
Well, I have one too. I have a different one.
Oh, I thought we were okay. Shit. Now I'm gonna have to go upstairs and get my notes.
We had some technical difficulties, but we're back.
No, this isn't technical difficulties. This is Courtney difficulties.
This is user error.
Oh, gosh. Okay. So we are Queens of the Paddock, and we are talking history. So
we're talking F1 history today.
Okay.
Okay. So we each have a story that we're going to go over. And it's like, I feel like more little known history. Like I don't think every F1 fan knows either of these stories. Like I know I don't know the one that you're going to talk about. Like I don't know the details. So I'm excited to hear about that.
I mean, to be honest, I didn't really know about anything about either of them like prior
to I know
deciding to do this, you know.
I know. And okay, so we had mentioned mine in one of the episodes, and we were talking about like, well, I don't know, whatever. We mentioned it in one of the episodes, and we were going over all of the teams, and we had said like, oh, we need to research that more because I truly did not know all the details. But so, do you want me to start with mine?
Yeah. Let's.
Okay. So I'm going to set the scene for you.
Oh gosh.
It is February of 1958.
Oh, we're going old.
This is way back. This is vintage. This is vintage F1. And we're in Havana, Cuba, which is my family's homeland. So that also made me very excited for this.
Yeah, I feel like this is a great piece for you because you are Cuban.
Yeah, for sure. So the main thing that happens in this story is Juan Manuel Fangio, who was at the time the best driver in the world. He had at this point won 5 World Drivers' Championships. He is kidnapped at gunpoint from the hotel lobby where all of the F1 people were staying the night before the Cuban Grand Prix.
Okay, first of all, I have a question. How do you get kidnapped at gunpoint and no one else is like stopping it or gets involved?
Oh, there was people around.
That's what I'm saying. Like,
we're gonna get into it. This story is wild. This story is wild. So, okay, so a little history about Fangio himself. He was Argentinian. He grew up down there. His parents were Italian immigrants, and they had come to Argentina. They were very working class, didn't have a whole lot, but Fangio started to get into racing, and he worked his way up like in Argentina doing racing stuff there, and then ended up moving into Europe and moved into the whole European scene. So whenever F1 started, it was 1950, and he was already 38 years old, but he joined the F1 championship and started with it like from the start. So he was very successful from the beginning of just being an F1, and he ended up winning, like I said, the 5 championships like in the first few years of the whole F1 situation. And he was super famous, probably the most popular driver. Everyone knew him to be very friendly. He was very popular, like I said. He was very cool, calm, collected, all of those things. So for this to be like happening, for him to be kidnapped, it would be like if like Lewis Hamilton got kidnapped, or like Max Verstappen got kidnapped, like before the start of a Grand Prix, like the night before. Like it was absolutely crazy for this to be happening.
It's a big deal.
It was a big deal.
It's not like Piastri or somebody like that, you know?
Right.
It's like, this is
like if Piastri gets kidnapped, they're like, oh, where is he? Is like, was he sick today? Like
he must have missed the bus.
Yeah, no, this was like a big deal. Okay, so then just some backstory on the Cuban Grand Prix. So back in like whenever F1 first started, not all of the races that they were doing were championship like title races. So they would do kind of like more of like an exhibition type races as well, like throughout the season. So
it's not like a building of points and things like that like it is now.
Right. Well, and a lot of them were. I mean, there definitely was like championship races, but there was a lot of races in between that didn't count for points. It was more of just like practice. This is just a fun race. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
or
to
maybe
go
getting the sport
practice. Right. Exactly. And so the Cuban Grand Prix was one of those. Like it wasn't a championship race. But they had the first Cuban Grand Prix in 1957, the year before. And it was super popular. Like it went off great. Fangio actually won that race. Mm-hmm. And just some kind of history, like Cuban history for everyone. So there had been at this point a lot of like unrest in the country. There still is to this day a lot of unrest in the country. But at the time, Batista was the president, dictator, whatever, what have you, running the country. And there was a lot of there was this movement kind of growing up that was called at the time the July 26th movement, but that ended up being like the Castro regime later on down the road. But so what they were trying to do was they basically wanted to overthrow Batista, and it was like kind of like a grassroots, like people, like these rebels were like getting together and they wanted to overthrow the government essentially. Mm-hmm. So Batista was really trying to do everything that he could to kind of like push that down and not make it be a known fact to other people, especially like other countries and just the general public. Like he wanted to put off this, I guess, like idea that everything was super happy and everyone was at peace and everything is great and it's so fun and look at this Grand Prix and all of that.
I was gonna say, I feel like every dictator wants that. Like
of
they
course.
Want the world to see like that their country's perfect.
Only the positive things and everything is looking great and everything's fine. So he wants to again organize the second Cuban Grand Prix because the first one was so successful. And he was really trying to boost like American tourism and have more people come down there. And so this was just going to be like a great showing for him, essentially.
Yeah.
But okay, so just with all of that backstory, so this July 26th movement, they were trying to kind of put off, like, because people, they had the, I guess, reputation of being like these bad people, like rebels, and they, like, you know, people were scared of them, whatever. And so they were really trying to improve their reputation. So their whole goal was to kidnap Fangio and then like just to prove a point. But then
you're trying to have a better reputation, so you decide that kidnapping
is
somebody. The best way to show that I'm improving my reputation.
Right.
I'm not a bad person.
Like I'm a nice person. I'm going to kidnap this guy.
Like
And it's going to be great.
What is that?
It's insane. That's what it is. But so, okay. So they came up with this plan and they did a bunch of research. They were trying to figure out, you know, all of the different time frames of like when people would be coming and going from this race, like what would be the best opportunity for them to kidnap him. And initially they wanted to try to do it like after qualifying, but then that didn't work out. So
why didn't it work out? Like just
there was too many people around,
Okay.
and there was like, you know, they figured out, they were like, okay, this is not going to work. But so Fangio goes to qualifying. He actually qualifies on pole for this race. And yeah. And so then like they all go back to this hotel. And so they're like following them there. All the drivers, mechanics, everyone that was kind of with them was down in the lobby. There was like a bar down in there. They're like having cocktails, chatting, what have you. And all of a sudden, Fangio gets somebody, like comes up behind him and kind of like pokes something into his side. But he thought it was somebody. And it's really interesting too, because I listened to like interviews, like old interviews with him about this. And so he's talking and saying like, whenever this happened, like I thought it was somebody poking me and like to ask me for an autograph or something. And so he's like this friendly guy. He turns around and he's like, hey, what's going on? And they're like, then he realizes the guy has a gun and he's telling him like, I'm kidnapping you. You need to come with me. Like, and meanwhile, there's tons of people. Like this lobby is full of people.
But does everyone know he's being kidnapped, or is it?
Well,
like,
and I think they like
subtly-
realized it right away. They were like, "Oh my god!" Like this guy, like because he had a gun and he was like showing the gun.
Yeah, but is he yelling and screaming it, or is he just
I
more
don't
so
think
like
he was
in his
yelling.
ear, like you need to come with us? And
Right. And so he did tell him too. He was like, if anybody calls the police or alerts anybody, we have a bunch of people with machine guns like stationed outside. And they're basically going to light this place up. So he's like, they have to wait at least 5 minutes is what he tells them.
Okay.
So he's like, come with me. So they go and they get in this car and there's obviously like the car's already running. There's people driving, like someone was driving. There was other people in the car and then the kidnapper guy. And so he's in there and he's like, obviously like, oh crap, you know, like this is not a good situation. And the kidnappers put a baseball cap on him, some sunglasses, they're trying to disguise him. And they're just telling him like, you know, be quiet, act normal, like be still. I like how you, oh, are you like getting in character?
I am.
I love it. Okay. So Fangio starts to notice that all of these kidnappers are like super nervous. They're very agitated. They're literally sweating. They're like stressing out. And so he's like, look, like, do you guys want a ransom? Like he was like trying to figure out what the goal was, you know? And so he starts asking like, you know, why am I being kidnapped? Like, are you guys looking for money? Like, what is the story? And they're like, well, no. And so they start to explain to him, like, they're part of the July 26th movement. They wanted to do this because Batista is trying to like pretend like everything in the country's great. And all of these people are like trying to get together to overthrow the government. And he's trying to ignore that. And he's in denial. And so they're doing this to get notoriety essentially for their movement.
Okay.
And so he was like, look, I don't want to get hurt. Like, I will do whatever. Like, I'm going to cooperate, whatnot. So they're like, okay, great. So then they like drive around. This movement, they had a bunch of different like safe houses in the suburbs of Havana. And so they go to a few different safe houses. They're trying to basically like make sure that there's not a trail on them.
I mean, that makes sense because if you just go to one place and stay there, like,
right, and then somebody could have been following you or whatnot.
Yeah.
But so in the meantime, the people back at the hotel, they've obviously alerted the police, whoever, like Fangio got kidnapped. Like, this is crazy. And so Batista and all the people from the government, like, they're like frantically trying to find him because this is going to ruin the Grand Prix. Like, they're like, we can't have literally Fangio being kidnapped. Like, this is not a good look for anybody.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, it's not a good look for, like, F1. It's definitely not a good look for Cuba.
No.
Like,
right.
I'm sure, like, every single, like, you know, tourist or whatever that was there is like,
right.
oh my gosh, like, am I going to be kidnapped? Like,
exactly. This is definitely not a good look.
This is crazy. Yeah.
Right. So one of the things that they start to do is go to, like, obviously they put up all these roadblocks. They, like, close the airport because they're wanting to make sure, like, that he doesn't go that far. Mm-hmm. And then, two, they started to go to a lot of the jails and stuff and, like, interview people that were involved with this July 26th movement to see if, like, they knew anything, like, what kind of information could they get about the plans that they had and whatnot. So they're all trying to figure this out. Meanwhile, back Fangio with the kidnappers, they finally, like, settle in at one of these safe houses, and he starts to, like, be really friendly with these kidnappers because he's really trying to put the charm on of, like, don't hurt me, like, like, yeah. I'll do whatever.
Like,
he was, like, signing
money, you know,
yeah, he was signing autographs for them. Yeah. He was, like, chatting with them, just, you know, getting to know them. And mm-hmm. even in some of the interviews, like, he said, like, genuinely, like, I started to like these guys. Like, they were pretty okay. Like, they fed him. Yeah, they were giving him food. They were just having conversation, you know, whatnot. So he's basically becoming friends with these kidnappers. And he asked them if he could call his family in Argentina because he's thinking, like, you know, at this point, news has gotten out, and they also had a radio on, and they were listening to, like, the news coverage, and so they knew people were looking for him. Like, they knew that the news had gotten out already, and so he asked to call his family in Argentina. The kidnappers let him talk to him. Or talk to them. And so that was good. He was happy about that, obviously. And so then they asked him to write them 2 letters. So they wanted him to write a letter for the Cuban newspaper and then also for the Argentinian embassy. And basically they're like, you know, we just want you to write about how nice we are and how well we've been treating you. And because, again, they're trying to get this reputation of, like, being these nice people that kidnap people
which sounds ludicrous.
It is ludicrous. But I mean, that was their whole shtick. Like, they wanted mm-hmm. the general public to be like, oh my God, they're so nice. Like, this is going to be so much better than what we have currently. Like, we should join in on this mm-hmm. situation. Mm-hmm. But so anyways, and he kind of, so Fangio being Argentinian, he kind of, like, understood a lot of the politics of the situation because of the whole, like he had lived through, like, Evita Peron and, like, all of the kind of similar stuff that they've dealt with down there. So he was like, okay, like, I'm kind of, like, I get it. Like, I can work with this.
Yeah. And he's not freaking, I mean, I'm sure he was freaking out, but not truly freaking out, because I'm sure for him, he knew, like, the end goal isn't for him to get injured. The end goal is just to make some noise in a different way.
Right, exactly. And I think, you know, he understood, too, with basically in the conversations he had been having with these kidnappers, like, if I play my part, like, the goal is to not hurt me. Like, the goal is for mm-hmm. me to leave here in one piece. And mm-hmm. talk about how great they are. And he's like, yes. I'm down. Like, that's fine. Like, I'll do whatever.
Yep.
So, meanwhile, that was literally the night before the actual race, right? So, now it's the next day. And all of the people that are getting this race set up are waiting. Because they're like, well, Fangio's not here. He's literally pole sitter. He's, like, the star person for this race. So in the circuit, and I'll put a picture with the Instagram post for this episode, but it's called the Malecon circuit. And the Malecon is, like, it's kind of like a seawall. But it was literally right along, like, it's a street that's right along the seawall. in like next to the ocean, and it's a super narrow circuit. If you look at the map of it, it kind of reminds me almost a little bit of Monaco. Like it's very, very tight. It's very narrow. Yeah. And
is it still there? Is it still like
that street, it's an actual street. Like the street is still there.
So it's a street circuit.
Yes. Yeah, like they had set it up literally on the street. And so to that point, like this being, again, it's 1958. This is not a championship race. Like they did not have gates. They did not have barriers. It was very much like, we're just lining up on the street and like, we're going to have a race here.
That's insane.
And so I know it was crazy. And like there was a lot of people that, I mean, Havana was super populated. There was a lot of people that wanted to see this race. Like it was very, you know, of interest for everyone that's there. There was about 150,000 people in attendance, which is like a lot for the time. Again, they didn't have any gates. They didn't have any barriers. So everyone is just pretty much like, if you imagine like a regular city street, like they're lined up on like the sidewalk.
It's
like,
literally like a parade. Like
you
line up on the side of the road for a parade.
Correct. Yeah.
That's insane.
It's insane. And so people in the crowd are getting unruly because everyone knows like Fangio's been kidnapped. And so they're all going crazy. And I mean, there's people watching from like balconies and apartment buildings that kind of line the street. I mean, it was just insane madness. But okay, so Batista is trying to basically hold off because he is so like holding on to hope that like, no, we're going to find Fangio. They even put Fangio's car literally like in the first grid spot, like on the grid. Like they were like with no driver. They like lined his car up because they were like, no, like it's cool. Like we're going to find him. He's just going to be a little bit late. Yeah, like they're trying to pretend like nothing's wrong. Right. And so they're holding on to this hope. So he essentially waits for 2 hours. Like he delays this race start for 2 hours until finally they were like, look, the crowd is getting super unruly. Like everyone's been waiting. They want to see this race. Like we're going to have to start. We're going to have to start without him. Everyone knows he's been kidnapped. And so they're like, okay, whatever, start the race. So the race starts. It's going good, whatnot, until one of the cars, which was a Ferrari, which I didn't mention this, but Fangio at this time was a Maserati driver. He was driving a Maserati. But so one of the cars, which was a Ferrari, lost control and skidded over like an oil patch that was on the track, aka road, and skids into the crowd, injuring more than 30 people and killing 7. Yeah. What? I didn't even know that about this story.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But that goes to show you like how crazy back in the day there was no safety regulations. And like the regulations then were like nothing. And like now you look at it today that, you know, I mean, last year when Joe flew off the track in between the barrier, I mean, like, can you imagine if we were back in the 50s?
Yeah.
So many more people would have been injured. You know what I mean?
Which on that topic, so I saw this news yesterday. It was the track in Portimao in Portugal. They were doing like, it was some kind of IndyCar or some other different motorsport situation. But they're on the track and a driver crashed, kind of similar to like Joe's crash. And his car went over the gate. And it landed literally like in the grandstands.
Wait.
But there was no one sitting there. Like, how lucky is that?
Out of chance, no one was sitting there?
Out of chance, no one was sitting there. No one got injured.
Oh my god.
How lucky is that? But like, it's still like, that just goes to show you, like, these cars are going so fast. Like, there's always that
risk,
that chance, you know? Yeah. It's crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah. But so this crash that happened at the Cuban Grand Prix, it's still, like, to this day, one of the worst events in motorsports because literally 7 people got killed, 30 people, more than 30 people injured. So after that happens, clearly the race is called off. Like, it's done.
Yeah.
Fangio has been kidnapped. This horrible crash happens. Like, huge tragedy. Terrible. So Fangio and all the kidnappers, they're still in the safe house. And they're listening to this on the radio because they've been playing all the news and everything. And so he hears this and then he starts to think to himself, like, oh my God, I am so lucky to have been kidnapped, because he had been having issues with his car. Like he felt like his car was like unstable, and he had been complaining about it during qualifying and all of that. So he's thinking to himself, like, thank God I got kidnapped, because that could have been me. Like I could have had a crash like that. So now the kidnappers, they feel like, okay, their goal has been accomplished. Like the race has been ruined. They've definitely gotten the news out, all of that. So now they're like, okay, well, we're going to return you. Like, we're going to unkidnap you. Like, we're going to take you back now.
Unkidnap you?
Yeah. But so then Fangio starts to get really stressed out, because he knows and understands, like, Batista and all of his people, like, they're going to be trying to spin this in a way that makes these kidnappers and the July 26th movement look as bad as possible. So he's like, look, if you take me back to that hotel and just drop me off, like, one of their people is going to get me and like have me murdered, and then they'll blame it on you, like saying that you killed me. So he's like, we can't do that. And so they're like, he's freaking out, stressing out. So he asked them to take him to the Argentinian embassy, like in the middle of the night. Yeah. So he's like, look, that's the safest place. Like, we got to reach out to somebody there. Let them know we're coming, and then we'll get there like in the middle of the night. No one will see us.
Yeah.
So that's what they do. And they passed him off to the embassy. No issues. Everything was good. And then Fangio comes out and says, you know, like, I've been let go and these people are very merciful and whatnot, whatever. So they get what they wanted out of the situation. He goes free. He's happy. And he essentially like became more of a celebrity because of the situation, because it was like, you got kidnapped and like, oh my God, tell us the whole story. And like, he was on like, I mean, at the time, like,
Good Morning America.
Say, like, yeah, like whatever the equivalent was of like in the United States, which like, in the U.S., like, this wasn't really a big thing in the U.S. and like people didn't, like, he wasn't like a household name there. But after this, like, he starts to be in like different magazines and newspapers all over the place. And so he pretty soon after this whole ordeal retires from racing, because he's like,
he was 38 at the time. So
well, no, at this point he was older, because at this point he was like 44, because he was 38 whenever he started in F1. Right. Yeah. So I think he was like 44 at the time.
And after being kidnapped, I think I would be like, I think I'm gonna go take a little slower pace in life.
We're good. Yeah. But so pretty much, a lot of people credit like his cool, calm collectedness of like being able to keep it all intact throughout the situation for him to like survive this and come out and be good. So really That's interesting cool. Story. Oh, and also too, I want to say after the fact, so more Cuban history for you. So in January of 1959, Castro and this July 26th movement, they overthrow the country and get Batista out. The Cuban Grand Prix did not take place in 1959 because they were like in the final stages of doing this whole overthrow situation. But they did have one last one in 1960. And that one didn't take place on that circuit on the street. It actually took place on some service roads around a military airfield. So if that gives you a little vibe of what was going on with Castro, it was not good. And anyways, and then Fangio in the 1980s traveled back to Cuba and met up with his kidnappers, and they hung out like they were old friends.
It's insane.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I guess I kind of get it, you know?
So that's the story about how Fangio, the most famous driver at the time, got kidnapped the night before a Grand Prix.
That's insane.
It's fascinating.
It is. It's a cool story. I didn't know anything about that.
I know.
So, well, thank you for researching and sharing.
Yeah, loved it.
Yeah. Okay. So now that I know that I was responsible for one of these topics, I am going to go over the South African Grand Prix in 1982 and the driver strike that we had.
Ooh,
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to say like this is a little bit cliche because I feel like almost every sport, like the players of some sort or the, players or I guess drivers, whatever you want to call it, like in some point in time has been unhappy with something with the governing body. And so they've gone on strike. But I think it's a little cool that, they
like,
stand
is
up
this
for
the
what they
only
believe in. So, as Alex kind of said earlier, so we're going to go back to the 80s, 1982 to be specific, in South Africa. And also to note about this, so South Africa was a very prominent, like, well-known race. So when this strike took place, it actually was the 28th year of the South African Grand Prix. Which is like, to me, I'm like, that's a big deal. Like, yeah,
that's like a really long-standing race.
Yeah, that's like some of the Italian ones or Monaco.
Right.
Like, it's. I don't want to say the heart of the season, but kind of. So
right, it was like a mainstay.
Yeah, it's a main stage. Yeah, exactly. So the 1982 race was the first race of the season. So that's also kind of what was interesting to me about this is that we're kicking off the season. Everyone's ready to get back into it. And we go on strike.
Oh, my God.
Like,
how
it's not
frustrating.
even like it's not even like we're like, okay, halfway through the season, unhappy.
Right.
It build. Oh, no. First race.
First race of the season. Like, what a bummer.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. But I'm like, after hearing all about this, I kind of was like, okay, I would have been in on this also.
You would have gone on strike? Okay, I can't wait to hear.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, my God. Okay, tell me.
I feel like I'm also like, I don't know. This would piss me off. Okay. So the reason for the strike was they were protesting the new super license conditions imposed by the FISA, which is like the old FIA.
Governing body.
The governing body. And so what they were what the conditions that they imposed in the new season that all the drivers didn't like was that the FISA made it illegal for any driver to criticize the governing body, and they would only be allowed to say good things about the FISA. Can you imagine? Yeah. So
this is like a dictatorship.
It's like a dictatorship. Yeah. And like, can you imagine like whenever like, who was it? Alonso and all of that was like upset at the race where he got third and then he got penalized. And then he got, like all of that. Oh, you wouldn't have been able to say
you wouldn't
anything.
Wow. So they wouldn't be allowed to like question any calls that were made.
I don't think it's questioning calls. I think it's that you cannot publicly go out and criticize the governing body. So like if you disagreed with like something like some call or something like that, you can
you just have to like keep it to yourself.
Yeah, just sit there and just
oh my God, that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's like almost like, oh, you can drive but you can have no voice. Like you just you're just a driver. You're not a person, Okay. Yeah. So that was the first big thing, which I was like,
there's more.
Oh yeah, that's not the only reason to strike. I mean, but also you have to remember in the 80s, I feel like that's when most countries and stuff like that, and I don't even know when all of like Nelson Mandela and all of that and whatnot was going on, but I would say around the world for the most part, I feel like most people were starting to like have the standard of freedom of speech.
Right.
To have your governing body be like, oh no, you can't say anything but good things about us, like
well, but it's almost kind of like their new thing where they can't make political statements.
Exactly. But there's a difference between political statements and criticize. Like, the fact that you can't have having
an opinion, essentially.
Yeah. I can understand the political side of things because I feel like that's a very, very touchy subject across the board, right? But I mean, you should be able to like question or, you know, I don't know, say your opinion on the governing body.
Right.
You know, yeah. Okay, so that was the first thing. The second thing was, and I think this is probably the biggest piece of it, the drivers would no longer be allowed to negotiate contracts with other teams themselves. So, the control of who you drove for was only left up to the teams now. So, like, you couldn't have any say in, like, where you went or why you went there and things like that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And the fear with the drivers with that was that they felt like the teams were going to team up and say, oh, well, I want your driver for this race, so you have to go just drive for that team. And then they were going to like flip flop them all around. But the driver
like throughout the season?
Throughout the season. And the driver would have no say. Like, it's not like, it's like, even like, you know, when you get traded and stuff like that, I think you still have to sign off on like.
Right. You have to agree.
Team. Yeah. Like either you go to that team or if you don't want to go to that team, you're on no team. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, so, like, they were not allowed to, like, that was one of the things. They weren't allowed to negotiate any of their contracts on their own anymore.
What? Yeah. So, like, okay, so throughout a race, like a race season, so, like, let's say I'm Max Verstappen. Like, wouldn't every team, like, want me on their team?
Yeah, but
so then what happens?
But your own team wouldn't want to, like trade you or whatever, let you go, right? It would be like the drivers like Oscar Piastri or someone like that maybe isn't like the key person. Then they potentially would get traded throughout the season
to try to get a better person on their team. Okay, I got it.
But you would have no control.
Wild.
Yeah. And so like all of these rules like got imposed in that season and then like the drivers were unhappy with it.
Of course.
Back then I don't think there was like necessarily like a drivers union. Like I think now there's more of like there's an organization that kind of like supports the drivers and like their opinions and their voice and things like that. But back then there wasn't as much. So
wow. Yeah, no, I'm with you now. I'm like, okay, where's my little sign? Like I'll be on strike too.
Picketing. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we're going on strike.
The other thing that the drivers didn't like that was imposed in these new super license changes or whatever is that the drivers would be tied to a single team for 3 years.
Oh, so they wouldn't like be able to like, jump around.
Yeah, like so say you joined and you're a part of Williams, right? And then like you know, you do really well or whatever, and then say Ferrari or something like a year later wants to offer you a contract, you aren't allowed to because you were tied to that original team for 3 years.
Oh my God.
What? Yeah.
Ugh. Yeah.
So no good. Anyways, so with that, we had kind of two leaders of the strike at the South Africa Grand Prix. The first one was a Ferrari driver. What's his name? Pironi. Yeah.
Ooh, Pironi. Okay.
Yeah. And then the second one was McLaren driver, Lauda.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Yeah. Which I was surprised. I was like, Nikki, for him to be like,
yeah.
Like center,
but I feel like Nikki was very vocal on like his thoughts. And his opinions.
He was vocal, but I mean, to be a leader of a strike, I mean, that's very different. So anyways, so all of the Grand Prix weekend starts, right? All of these conditions have, you know, the drivers know what's going on and stuff like that. The drivers start talking, and I think they had been talking about it for weeks, you know, and they were unhappy about it, right? So the two of them team up together, and they decide, okay, we're gonna do something about this. And note that they also went to the FISA at the time and tried to like work with him and have conversations about like all of this, and pretty much they were like, get away.
No, we're not hearing you.
Yeah.
So they didn't want to communicate. They didn't want to like compromise on anything.
Yep. Exactly. So,
oh my gosh.
What the two strike leaders did was they went to the hotel. They went to the track. They rounded everybody up. Everyone got on a bus. Everyone left the track and went to a local hotel down the street and just posted up in the hotel. Literally.
And they were like, we're not leaving.
Oh, they're not leaving. Yeah. Literally, like, they were like, no. They did this on Thursday during the practice session.
Oh my God.
Literally, everyone else is at the track. All of this is going on.
All the teams, all the people.
Oh, yeah. All the teams, everything. Like, spectator, not one single driver was at the track.
Wait, so, okay, that's what I was going to ask you. Like, was there any drivers that were like, no, like, I don't want to strike. Like, I'm just going to go with it?
Not originally. So originally everyone was like
on board,
right? So the Grand Prix Drivers Association or whatever, they arranged a bus, picked everyone up, dropped everyone at this local hotel or whatever, and whatnot. And so they're all kind of hanging out, and you'll have to I'll have to send you some pictures, or you can Google it. But there's pictures of them all in this conference room, like sleeping on the floor, hanging out. It's like a big,
it was like a slumber party. Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, like they're
insane.
sitting there, and I think Nikki was the only person that stayed at the track, but he stayed at the track as a negotiator for the drivers.
For the group. Right.
Yeah. For the group. Like, okay, hey, look, we're all on strike. We're all not driving. I'm your person. Let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Well, the FISA did not take to a strike very well.
I'm sure.
To the point where they told them that if the drivers didn't make it to the race the next day, that they would all be banned from F1 for the remainder of their life.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Again, it's like a dictatorship.
It's a dictatorship.
This is crazy.
And I think that's what like the drivers were kind of like, you know, you're not going to impose these rules on us that we don't agree with, and then make threats like that, and like, you know what I mean? Like that's just not.
That's wild.
Yeah. So all of them just sit there. So the next day comes around, no one goes to the track, and you know, so the FISA starts, you know, threatening more and blah, blah, blah and whatnot and all the talk. And what was it? Yeah, so they talk. And then finally, Nikki gets the FISA to start having open dialogue about, like, the rules and whatnot. And so eventually they come back to, like, some type of an agreement, right? But before it happens, you asked me if anyone had given up or, like, stayed back at the track. Well, there was two people that in the midst of all of this decided to leave the hotel and go back to the track. One was Fabi. He was one of the people that gave up. And then Tolman, he gave up because he was making his F1 debut and he didn't want to jeopardize his chance of, like,
so he was like newer. See, I was gonna say, like, I feel like if anybody would like kind of chicken out on this situation, it would be like some of the newer people.
Yeah, but those are they're
like,
two.
like this is my dream. Like I can't like, just sit in this hotel.
Well, and for like a solid day, I mean, the FISA at the time was like, I mean, threatening banning for life, and there was a lot of other things that they were threatening. So I mean, being young, you might have been like, oh, like. But originally, everyone was on board. Everyone got on the bus, which is insane to me. Like usually from the get-go, you don't have
there's usually like a couple people, right?
Yeah. So they were the only two that, backed out of this or whatever, and eventually the FISA came to an agreement with the drivers, and the Grand Prix ended up going off and everything like that. And most of them just had received like $10,000 fines, and then they also got some suspended race bans or whatever. The funny thing about
so they got fines for this?
Oh, yes. They got fines. And that was like the average fine. I think Ricky and the Ferrari driver got like larger fines, but I think in their minds they were like, it was worth it.
We don't care. Yeah.
But then years later, when the FISA was like restructured and then replaced by the FIA went back and actually like, I think reevaluated a lot of this, and then like, I don't want to say refunded money, but essentially like went back and like rectified some of the
situation,
the punishments that some of the drivers had received, because
they felt like good.
Yeah, because they felt like in the 90s when all of that happened, they felt like it was overdone. Like it shouldn't have been to that degree and stuff like that. But so I mean,
my God,
in a nutshell, that was the South Africa Grand Prix strike, which I don't know, I think it's kind of cool. And like I said, like I was, after finding out like why they were striking, I was like, oh, I would have been the first up there, because I was like, no, you're not going to tell me like I have no control over my career, or like what I can say, or like, especially growing up in the United States as like freedom of speech and things like that, I'd be like, no,
absolutely
not gonna fly with me.
No, that's crazy.
Yeah. So,
oh my gosh,
just
so interesting.
A little bit of history outside of the U.S. and whatnot. So, yeah.
No, I loved that. I think that's super fun. Like, we're gonna have to find more topics like this, because I like doing these episodes.
Oh yeah,
like,
for
it's
sure.
just like so interesting. There's so many different things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's also good to see, like, I don't know, just over the years, again, like, to see, like, in the 50s, someone kidnapped and, like, for political reasons, and then you go, 30 years forward, and, like, the governing body is, like, taking away your voice. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just interesting to see the evolution of the sport, and, like, not just on the car side. Like, the evolution of, like, the drivers and the governing body, and like, I don't know, just the whole makeup of, F1 and motorsports. So
and how everything works together. No, it's super interesting. Super interesting. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Well, fun.
Well, I think that's all we have today.
Yeah. No, okay, so we're gonna have to think of more like that. I know I want to, I think for next week, go over Crashgate.
Oh, that would be fun.
And then how Felipe Massa has like tried to reopen that whole situation, because he's questioning Lewis's drivers championship title from that after that season. So I think we'll do that for next week, and then it'll be race week again.
Yeah, and Alex's birthday. First sprint race of the season, which the sprint race. Yeah, I mean, we'll talk about it more when we talk about that race. But the structural changes on the sprint race have changed.
Yeah, and how they do it for like qualifying and all of that. So that's super interesting, new, fun, exciting. We can't wait.
Yeah. So. Well, thanks everyone for listening, and you can find us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify with video. Where else?
YouTube with video.
Oh yeah, that right. Yeah.
Anywhere else you listen to your podcasts, we are streaming on there, and then on Instagram at Queens of the Paddock, and then also on Twitter.
Yeah.
So, yes.
And look out for Alex's fun video and pictures that will go along with the episode. Because honestly, that's one of my favorite things is to see all of our Instagram posts that you do.
Yeah. Well, I feel like you need like an illustration because I'm a very visual person. So when I'm listening to something, I'm like, I need to see what they're talking about.
I know. That's why I was like, you need to post the picture of the slumber party because
yes,
it was
no,
like,
for sure.
Cool. So yeah.
Well, so much fun. Well, thank you guys for listening. This has been Queens of the Paddock, an F1 podcast. My name is Alex.
And I'm Courtney. And lights out and away we go.
We'll see you soon.
See ya.
Bye.